Y'all said that a martyr died, a leader of the people. And so I said, oh, Rolling Ray King.
Charlie Kirk, whether we like it or not, is definitely a political leader. I hate to say it.
When we're seeing these mass shootings, it's coming from them. And they want so badly to try to pin it on some type of, this is the left, this is the liberal.
If this is someone who leans towards the right, who voted for Donald Trump, and who is a white person, what then will the response be?
This is all a doing of whiteness. This is all their own fault.
They're already living in a fascist administration where they are stripping away our rights, doing away with people doing whatever the they want each and every day, and there are no checks and balances. There's no Supreme Court that's going to stop them. So what happens now?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
We had a very different topic planned for today, but then Charlie Kirk got packed up in the middle of the day. So
Broad daylight. I'm just saying the facts of the case.
Journalism.
You seen it? You seen it?
At its
Journalism.
finest. Period.
This is crazy.
So yeah, who has any opening remarks?
I didn't even know he was dead, girl.
Can we start there?
You
How
did
we
it.
got on
You
this
did it.
call and he was like, "What?"
Yeah, I
Kirk
was
said-
gagged. I was.
What are we gonna say? We talking about Roland Ray?
No, hold on.
You did say that.
Hold on. Let's contextualize that. Y'all said that a martyr died, a leader of the people.
I did
And so-
say I did as a joke.
And so I said, oh, Rolling Ray King, as in Luther. As in
Rest
Luther
in
King
peace.
Jr.
Rest in peace.
Roland
Because
Ray
that's
was an
the
icon.
only death. That's the only death I was willing to acknowledge in the political leader of the people space. However, we're
Hello.
here. So,
Charlie Kirk, whether we like it or not, is definitely a political leader. I hate to say it, but he is. And I feel like he is a lot of the reason why they said that while Trump is reelected and has his younger
Mhm.
male voting base, and how all of those folks have been indoctrinated into this type of masculinity. Look, about to sound woke and they gonna hate it. But like, it's some cult shit. I went
Yeah.
back down the rabbit hole today, like in between this little bit of time of the announcement versus now, just to refresh my memory on him. And I wonder, I'm like, what happened to this man to make him like this? Because he
Violent,
was not okay.
evil,
And he white.
No.
unprovoked.
Well,
I
it's
think
also...
What happened?
Yeah,
to him?
I didn't know I still don't know Charlie Kirk's origin story, but I
And you
found today to
won't.
be particularly interesting because I just Googled him like 2 weeks ago, maybe, when he made the remarks he made some remarks geared towards Taylor Swift. It was when she first got engaged and was saying, I guess on his show, saying that she should be this vessel for all these babies and let the husband lead. And I Googled him because I was like, is this man married? Because he had a lot to say about the institution of, traditional marriage. And that's when I learned he had a family and stuff. And so to be a week or so later, it's like, wow, what a swift turn in the news.
He said a lot.
Very swift.
No, he absolutely
said
said
a
a
lot.
lot. And to be honest,
Shitty
one...
guy. He was a f***ing white supremacist
let's-
bigot. Like,
Correct.
Okay, you're going to start...
I just want to start off by saying, first of all, because I'm a human being, seeing that shit is crazy. Like, when you see that, you forget like who he is, and you just see this guy's like body go limp, the fair, like the this, and I can't help but feel for that. And I have a substantive set of thoughts on what this means for political commentators in general and all of that, because ultimately that's how, when you take away the political whatever, he's a content creator, he's a political commentator, and they packed him up. This is somebody who watched George Floyd get killed and called him a scumbag who deserved it.
Yep.
He's a literal white supremacist. This is a guy who, on the heels of shooting, mass shooting after shooting, and said he's literally Lord Farquaad. Like, it's a risk. Some of you may die, but it is a risk I am willing to take.
Literally.
That's his position. So, and his last words, the irony of, like, he was just talking shit about how shootings, these mass shootings and all of this ain't the kind of problem like gang violence is. Gang violence, he was talking shit to his last breath. That was the last thing he said before.
And I'm going to keep it a bean with y'all, to be honest. Like, sorry for it.
No, it's totally fine.
It's really giving poetic justice. I'm gonna be very honest. Like he said, there must be necessary deaths in order to maintain your Second Amendment rights. And so even for this to be the moment, it's here is the necessary death in order to protect your Second Amendment rights. And so for me, I said, well, if you gonna live by it, you gonna die by these words too. So for me personally, it's interesting because like I really just don't have any empathy for anybody who totes conservative talking points, who pushes people to dehumanize anybody, particularly Black folks, queer folks, trans folks. I really do not have any sympathy or empathy because there is a slow drip of violence that comes with politics that we have to suffer through every single day, and the millions of people that go through because he decided to speak this ideology, because he assisted in getting that trash in the White House. Like all of this space here, I don't have empathy for it because I witness my people go through things every single day. And I was like, if that is the case, and if this is where we want to suddenly have a little bit of empathy because we're like, this is political violence, it shouldn't be like this, da 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 da. Yes, there's a space as somebody who creates content and who creates stuff, and is in more of the political spaces sometimes too. We can have that little bit of tension there to have a semblance of empathy of like, what does this mean for the larger context of content creation and political commentary? However, my first thoughts are, well, got the wrong one, but it's one of them, so we're going to call it a day and keep it pushing. So those are my first quickie thoughts.
I feel like oh, I'm so sorry. Miss Brown. Still running away from the Christina gag. I feel like for me, this is what I don't know if I have necessarily an empathetic approach because he is a political commentator, content creator, but more so because I do actually try to practice. I wouldn't say that I'm there, but I actually try to practice a politic of love. And that's why I don't have a really empathetic response, because I feel like there was a politic of hate endemic in what he was talking about. It's not necessarily that we're on different ideological ends of the spectrum, of the political spectrum. It's more so that endemic or intrinsic, the foundation of his politic to me was hateful of minority groups, was hateful of folks that are different from him. And I think especially the more I read like Bell Hooks or Bayard Rustin specifically, this politic of like really being a pacifist and nonviolent approaches to, and more empathetic approaches to creating a more collective and whole union, trying to achieve the promise of America. It's like, if that's the cornerstone of your politic, even if I fundamentally disagree with you, I would have more of a visceral, emotional, or empathetic response when folks do things like this. I would never condone it. I feel like I'm inching towards pacifism unless someone touches me, then it becomes pacifist.
Okay, Malcolm X said, I'm nonviolent with those nonviolent with me.
There you go. And so I think that's really my initial thoughts, because again, I did not know that he was dead until about, how long have we been recording? 8 minutes? Until about maybe 10 minutes ago. So those are my initial thoughts.
I think
no.
Girl.
And I don't want to see it. Girl, I don't dwell with things like that.
Definitely scroll.
You'll like
this. Are you going to play it on the show? No, I was like, when Antoinette said this is not that, I was like, did you think I was going to play it on the show?
Not at area. I didn't think that at all. But I know he said I don't want to see it. This is an important clip, I think.
I'll let the clip play, and then I'll say.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given
There it
rights.
is.
That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
And
So
you
your
will
death
not be
has been
talking like that
rational.
anyways. And he will not be talking like that anymore. So anyways, sorry. No, but crazy. I think there's more clips.
This is just me being
Okay. I have something to say to that one. Answer what Herbie was talking about the pacifism. I feel very similarly as far as what it is that I strive for. And I am a hypocrite. I am not better all the time. My first initial response actually to this was I started to see the violence is not the answer brigade. And I was like, I need them to take a break for a second because we see peace every other day. The peaceful protest, the peaceful explaining, the peaceful educating, the peaceful tears. Every other day we're operating in peace. And the moment there is a day where, and on those peaceful days, we love to talk about the theory and the rhetoric of like, there's multiple ways to resist and everyone has a role and everyone's important to the movement. But then when the moment happens where the violence was indeed the answer on this here day, people want to immediately appease. And I'm like, back maybe a couple years ago when it wasn't as violent as it is now, okay, we can have that theoretical discussion. But I mean, at this point, it's every day something is happening. While this happened, there was, 2 other school shootings that happened?
right.
Yep.
Like, we cannot breathe. And unfortunately, seeing the demise of somebody who was an op and an active op and preyed on your downfall and mobilized on so many marginalized groups' downfall, those marginalized groups are going to feel happy at their demise. And that is not their fault. It is the world that we're living in. We want people to be better, right? But we're not really like surviving and better. And I think it's kind of the way that like how I think about my own restorative justice politic and stuff. Like I would love for a world where everyone can be rehabilitated. And I do think with a lot of stuff going on lately, I have been more liberal with that to where some people that I never would have thought could have been rehabilitated, I'm actually opening myself up to the thought of it because in order for me to believe that there could be a society better, I need to believe that certain people can be rehabilitated. And some folks are too far gone and you're so far gone that you lost a chance to even be rehabilitated because someone took you out. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
It is what it is,
like,
baby.
It's even like rehabilitation is like oriented, right? Like your idea of rehabilitation is oriented in a specific direction, like where you imagine what you imagine is like a progressive rehabilitation, someone moving in a progressive direction. And was it Mark Twain? Someone said that it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled. And so it's like when you're in this process of rehabilitation, it's not so much that you are inherently too far gone so that you cannot, or it impedes you or precludes you from being rehabilitated or brought back to the center to have actual conversation because you're so radicalized. It's just more so that you don't perceive these ideas that really are ideas about like, how do we create a more civil society, right? It's not about necessarily restructuring the Constitution to remove your Second Amendment rights or whatever. It's more so about having a discussion about like, oh, I think we've gone too far. When we say that there are more guns in the United States than there are people, perhaps we can have a discussion that perhaps we've gone too far. But there are people who are so deeply indoctrinated that when we're talking about progressive rehabilitation or moving in a direction that's more so like, can you see people as people? They see that as an affront to not only their politics, but their worldview. And it's rooted in faith, Americanism, patriotism, things that they feel are their human rights. So it's an affront, not just to their ideas, but them as a person. And at that juncture, we might just have to say, sister, well, perhaps you're too far gone.
I feel like I'm always like looking up where I'm sitting here looking up words because I want to be really intentional, especially with this. I feel like folks are going to expect me to be because I'm always talking about we got to keep our humanity. We got to keep our humanity. And I say that because I never want to turn into the people that I feel like I'm actively fighting against and trying to help recalibrate the way that they look at the world. I say that, and I also think there are people that are too far gone. I also think that not everybody was going to make it. Harriet had to let some people go who couldn't get with the program. But with that said, I mean, I'm looking up sympathy, right? And sympathy is feeling pity for another. Empathy is our ability to understand how someone feels. And with that, I don't have empathy for him. I don't understand him or people like him. I do have sympathy because I do pity him. I pity people who are so in their corner and so tightly gripping onto hate and fear and can't see a possibility of anything else. And it's really sad. With that said, I also think I am struggling with seeing all the virtue signaling from the Dems and from a lot of folks because it's just, that it's like they have to do it, they have to play the game. But it's going to make me physically ill because it's like, oh God. And I also know, I want to protect folks because I'm like, listen, you look like me. The job force is fucked up, especially for Black women. Like, we're losing jobs at a much quicker rate. Before you send that tweet, think about keeping it in the group chat, right? And I also don't want to police how people feel right now because I'm like, you're not going to gaslight me and dehumanize me where I'm not allowed to feel relief that someone who wants to harm me is no longer in a position to do that, right? You're not going to tell me that in order to be viewed as human, in order to be respected, or I don't know, I don't know what the word is, that I have to somehow be Samuel L. Jackson and Django and holding on to my slave master and crying that this person is no longer with us. That's never going to be me. I'm not going to dance around all of the ands in this scenario. There's so much nuance here. It's like, and I think that's where we start to lead with humanity, is like, we have to talk about the nuance. And it's like, yes, he was a terrible, he did terrible things. He not only, I think Christina, you said was like an agent for just like a chaos agent, someone who mobilized, but he did it effectively. Like, it wasn't just like he was somewhere in a corner talking shit. It's like he helped get policies passed. He helped change government for the foreseeable future. And so this person is dangerous. And we have to be able to have that conversation while also saying shooting somebody in the neck is a crazy thing to do. It's a crazy thing to see. But also, this country does it all the time. All the time. Also, I don't know. I don't know how to have this conversation without having all the things. And I feel like I need to plug into a damn cord because my internet's being up. So give me a second. And I apologize for that.
There's also, there's been this right-wing evangelical push to make empathy a sin, right? There's books that have been written within the past 5 years about the sin of empathy. And there is a quote of Charlie Kirk's that's going viral since he's passed. And he said, I think empathy is a made up new age term that has done a lot of damage. And so that's just one of many of his quotes that are, circling back at inopportune times for him and his family and his friends right now. And so I think that there's something to be said about the tone policing, to Christina's point, that has been happening online, which Charlie Kirk's death is not the first example or the first time that we've seen this. It seems to happen every single time something happens. I think back to Dylan Roof and going in that church and murdering the Black people a decade ago, and how some of their families, like within the next day, were on national news saying that they forgave him, right? So that seems to be part of the optics when marginalized communities in particular are harmed, is this rush to not address the harm, this rush to not address some of the nuances that Antoinette just mentioned, and this rush to forgiveness, or this rush to perform forgiveness, if you will. So yeah.
And honestly, it's nothing that I personally even connect to in that space. I don't gotta perform forgiveness. I don't think Black people are obligated to do any of that stuff, to be honest. I will not extend the empathy or the sympathy to those who are preying on my downfall and politically actively in participating in my downfall. I actually don't have the space to want to be able to humanize that, because they've grossly dehumanized us. And when I say it's and only, I actually mean that shit every single time I post that. And so even in that, it takes me all the way back to 2016 when I was in college and I was watching this conservative movement begin to creep up across college campuses.
Yeah.
And so even being on a college campus during that time, it has become, well, let's see with all these conservative activists here on campus, conservative people who want more space on campus. And what does it mean to have both sides? So we had to have the Black Lives Matter organization. They were on, for one thing, Opal was on 1 month, and then they felt the need to bring Ben Shapiro on the next month as a way to directly respond to them being able to have BLM on campus, right? And so even as I think around this conservative movement, especially when it comes to younger folks, has been happening across the board. And so it's interesting to even kind of watch, like, this is just a long time coming. And now that we're entering damn near the 10th year of this dummy being in presidency, we are watching the fruits of their own labor, right? Then they're bad fruits, but they're fruits nonetheless. And so because of them planting these seeds, I actually don't think people realize that they are the reason that we are in this political moment right now, right? Conservatives, to be specific, they are the reason we are in this political moment right now. So if they do not understand the hand that they played, and if they choose not to understand, because at least they're not one of them over there, right? They're going to continue to play at their game the entire time, whether they're shooting themselves in the foot or not. And so even in this conversation, as we are talking around, like, what could have led up to this, it became people who just did not want to feel like they were wrong. It's a space where people no longer wanted to have a tone of politeness around them. They were upset because political correctness meant that they could not share their personal opinion wherever they felt the need to do it. And so as you have this perfect storm of people feeling like my opinion doesn't matter and nobody's listening to me, child, America's inception had your opinion at the forefront every single step of the way, right? Because it no longer was socially acceptable for about less than 8-10 years, if that. You had a full crash out, right? And so Black folks who don't always have popular politics in terms of liberation, abolition, even being liberal, whatever they want to call that now, right? That's not a popular politic for so many folks because they are so conditioned to being punitive. They are so conditioned to ensuring that there needs to be one over the other. There needs to be a second-class citizen, a citizen of 3/5, right? They have not let that shit go. And so for me, as I'm watching this, I'm like, this is all a doing of whiteness. This is all their own fault. And that's how you get to radicals acts such as this kind of political violence, gun violence, however we want to be able to position this. Both, we can say they couldn't coexist in this moment. But as we are having this conversation, and as those who are trying to figure out, like, yeah, I'm feeling lighter, and I don't need to perform as if I want to see forgiveness or I want to see any form of, like, let's put humanity at the forefront in this moment. I think holding those two things simultaneously is difficult sometimes. And I'm not in the space to want to do some mental gymnastics. So also just kind of giving space to those who kind of understand this trajectory, because that first bit back in 2015, 2016, sitting in college and watching these folks celebrate, I was like, y'all don't even care about the ways in which, like, we had to and this is when Black Panther came out. We had to organize the Black students to go off of campus because so many people in the middle America wanted to come and see Ben Shapiro talk. So the safest place was for us to go was escape that we called Wakanda. So for that hours that he was on that campus, Black people literally disappeared. We were like, this is not our business, it's not our problem. And so for us, it was like, one, how do you begin to advocate for ourselves in that moment, because we had to share space in this college environment. And what did it also mean to be able to preserve? So there was a little bit of escapism that could happen, but that escapism also led to our safety and not having to deal with potential racists that were coming to campus. So anyways,
I think there's a, a hee ha ha thing about it when, is this person, is this reprehensible person? And it's like all of the irony and being able to, use their words against them and all of this. But the reality is this: I have seen in America 1,000,001 times examples, real life tragedies that like should make people bite their words on guns, and it doesn't, it won't, nothing will change at all. Like, this is always the same song and dance after every shooting, even especially when it's in a place like Texas or something, like it can be directly attributed to the right in some way. The Democrats always come out, because there's only so you can't, especially in this administration, in this era, you can't come out and seem to what Antoinette was saying the wrong thing about this could be a whole different set of issues. And to that, I say, I need us to understand, for me, the reason why this is a bad thing, regardless of how you feel about him or his death, why this is a bad thing is because it says to you, we are in scary times. If you don't see in the middle of the scary movie, when shit's starting it's gonna get active, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if they are killing, like they're like, we see these politicians die now, what do you think happens now? It doesn't matter how we feel about him. What does the right do? Nothing's gonna happen for gun control or progressive legislation or anything like that. We are already living in a fascist administration where they are stripping away our rights, doing away with people doing whatever the they want each and every day, and there are no checks and balances. There's no Supreme Court that's going to stop them. So what happens now? This is a bad thing. This is not one of those things where like January 6th happened and it's like, let's get our jokes on Twitter, you know what I mean? Slap someone and go, no, baby. There are going to be consequences, bad things, something. And that's for me where I come in at that.
And I think like it definitely is gonna, real quick, it's definitely gonna escalate stuff. I mean, the pressure cooker has already been, especially considering a year ago, you had Trump's twice as 2 assassinations. That did not happen, right? This happening and it being successful, it's going to escalate. It's been, I mean, it happened because it already escalated. And I think even the verbiage of this being political violence and it not being a political official is very interesting. And that is a point that we're addressing the thing that's not being said out loud. Is that so we agree. We consider this YouTuber, content creator, podcast guy, debater as a political official in a way. Not literally, he's not elected, but we see how he is positioned in politics. We see his political influence. So if this is political violence, then let's talk about what's pissing me off about the Democrats is we could talk about not condoning this political violence, but they can't say one word about condoning political violence that Israel is doing, that they're complicit to. That's a whole other thing. But if this is political violence, okay, so then the rest of the type of violence we're dealing with is political violence. ICE is political violence. Can we now say the quiet part out loud that we are literally living in times of political violence? Because that's what it is. And what does that mean for the content creators, those of us who are liberal or leftist content creators? Because this type of danger, I've thought many a times of like going to public events and being like, I know that some of the words I'm saying, we were just talking about this before we started recording, that like some of the takes we're having right now before doing content, theory, arguing, whatever, cute clickbait, now it can make you an enemy of the state. So what does this mean now for the liberal left content creators, those of us who have been doing this now that he's got popped?
But it was like that before, right? There were many enemies of the state, and that's always an interesting thing for me, where I'm like, a lot of very progressive folks are like, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. It's all the same. And I'm like, well, until you start to feel what folks felt a little bit ago, not that long ago, where there was a period where everybody thought they was free for a second, but like folks were enemies of the state. This is not new. Like, and so now we're getting a taste of what that actual fight is, not just being behind the keyboard and typing and I'm not directing this to anybody on here, and typing away or posting a video and being able to be safe and know that my my right to say how I feel is intact. Nobody can come pick me up and I'm not going to be susceptible to political violence. That's out. That's out. And so this is part like this. I'm so sorry, but this is part of like
fine,
what
sorry.
is what we've lost, right? This is part of us going backwards, and where I have such it's showing not only the cracks within the country, but the cracks within us, where we actually didn't realize that this was a possibility because we were so spoiled with being able to say how we feel and to move about, many of us, freely. And so this is very scary. And I couldn't agree with both you and Olay anymore. Go ahead, Herbie.
No, yeah, I think this is what it illuminates for me is like this relief that a lot of people are expressing, and I'm sure they will continue to express, is a fallacy. I like it reminds me immediately about how a lot of people were talking about, like, when people were speculating that Donald Trump had met his maker, and like, oh my God, ding dong, the witch is dead, was the sentiment in my corner of the internet. And I was like, well, this is like, white supremacy is a very sustained idea that is rooted deeply in the foundation of America, especially now that, these people have all three branches of government. They have a Supreme Court that will acquiesce to whatever their desires are. It's like a very active and political Supreme Court. And also because the Overton window has shifted such that, to Christina's point, a lot of people who would not traditionally be considered political figures are now considered political figures because they go on YouTube and they get on maybe one or two, or I'm not counting or quantifying the amount of political presence or news shows he's been on, but you get on a couple of large platforms and you espouse your political ideas, and therefore now you are a political media pundit, right? And so when people can get on these large platforms and outwardly say things that say, like when people say I'm a fascist, and they feel like, oh, it's perfectly fine to say that. This is in line with my political ideas, right? And so when culture moves in a direction where, this kind of what feels like overt hate speech to me, I'll just say to me, becomes so normal. I'm not certain. Okay, has it always been like this? Yes. Has it always been this micro, like the punitive actions, have they been so specific? Have they been so targeted? There's something to be said about how calculated they've become to be able to target specific people on a variety of different strata in terms of their social capital. Like, we know Aretha Franklin was targeted. Her phones were bugged by the US government because she was singing songs about freedom, bailing out of jail.
I got James
right?
Baldwin's FBI files right in my crib. Like,
hello. But we're talking about, when we're talking about James Baldwin and Aretha Franklin, we're talking about superstars. We're not talking about people with, or regular people with a couple 100,000 followers online who are saying things that a lot of people are listening to. The landscape has changed where it's like, I feel like having an opinion, it, as you say, it makes you an enemy of the state, where the goal was to flood the zone. The goal was to, as you said, there was multiple shootings that happened just after Charlie Kirk shooting. And I'm sure between today, when we're recording this, and when this comes out, a million other things will happen. This will likely be highlighted because there's an agenda to push polarizing culture war content, because it feels like the girls want to, the girls being, white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist people in power, want to gaslight the people such that there's disarray so that they can take control. Like DC and the cop cities that we've been talking about, as Christina also mentioned, like these things we've been discussing that have been happening in practice, but we've been discussing them in theory. Oh, they've been waiting for the opportunity to implement them. So like, heralding him as a political figure is not necessary. It does illuminate the fact that he does have this level of power and political persuasion and control. But it's also like, if we bring him up to this space of political martyr, then we can create this kind of disorder and chaos that is the foundation of the control that we need. Through this chaos, we can disseminate what I just read something that said like 45% of all of Project 2025 has already been fully enacted, and we're only only 8 months in. And so I think what we respond to next is by saying, one, relief is a fallacy. There is no such thing as relief, especially when there are gerrymandering in ways that they've always done. I think saying that this has always existed is true because it acknowledges the state of the country that we've always lived in. But acknowledging also that what's happening is more swift, more aggressive, and it's happening at unprecedented rates is even more important, because it needs to give alert, mama. This is not normal. We need to actually, I won't say we, because I don't want to tell anybody to do anything that they feel is outside of their physical, emotional, or social capacity or economic capacity. But there needs to be a visceral response, because the way that these things are happening are going to impact us viscerally.
But I think if we're going to get into the role then of the content creator and the person with the platform, then I think it is actually important that you can name a we in this moment in time, right? Because we need to have a critical mass of folks to kind of help situate what this moment actually means and contextualize that moment. So oftentimes we're just like, I got a platform, but, So I think it's like a twofold situation. Retain your humanity and your safety and be smart in your action. But I think also for people as well, what we need to do is get ready for them to start marching for this man tomorrow, right? There's going to be active spaces where it is either protest or places of mourning, and you are going to see hot spots of folks who can become violent very quickly, depending on where this is at, right? This is also going to lead into the fact of now all colleges are going to have to start making responses as well, because it's happened on a college campus. Right. And so now the conversation will also turn into campus safety in America. And so when we are actually having this conversation of all the outcomes that will be happening, look out for the marches, look out for the conversation to turn into
mass hiring of police
everywhere, right? Like we need to get stuff back in order. We're going to see DC ramp all the way up. Any of these cop cities are going to ramp all the way up. Those protests that have been always happening, that are out in LA and all other major parts of the city that have been happening, we might see those also begin to ramp up. And this can incentivize the use of the National Guard in a fundamentally different way, right? And so they are going to be able to take this narrative and spin it. And so right now, the annoying part is going to turn into a battle of morality amongst different people and different platforms and all of that. So that's what that confusion is going to be. Politically, they're going to situate this situation as like, the left is out of pocket. This is all the disarray. We need order. And this is why we need somebody who has a strong arm. And then the other piece is like, how can they spin it in a way that now those on the college campuses and those who are currently being influenced in their young adulthood, how will this mobilize them even more and create a space where young conservatives are absolutely going to be ramping all the way up in their beliefs, because now that they have their martyr, they can now solidify. So it's going to be even harder to have them be able to change their ideas across the board, because now they have something to fight for and something to stand for. So we're going to see a cultural and political expediency kind of happen in terms of keeping them right in their place and in their beliefs and their own ethical code of whatever that looks like to them.
I just want to say this because sorry, just because you responded to me, and then I'm gonna back up. I'm sorry. I think that when I say I can't name the we, is because just having a platform does not impede you or mean that you have these social or economic structures to fight back in whatever way fighting back connotates or what it means, right? And I feel like having some semblance of everybody wants to risk different things. So that's why I say I also can't speak for different people, because some people have different ideas of what it means to risk something. I'm single with no kids, so right. Right. And so people have different ideas of what that means. I also think that in terms of fighting back, I think that has to be a more pragmatic approach, because as you talk about when we're talking about, like I said, when there's more guns than people in the United States, who do we think are the owners of these guns? And even if it isn't mostly white people, which it is, but even if it weren't mostly white people in this context where we're talking about potential protests and rallies and people taking to the streets because they feel like this is a martyr, maybe one potential form of messaging is reminding the people that this is one man, this is one content creator. Maybe it's taking, I don't know, and please don't take what Herbie says as fact, but maybe it is taking for a minute a beat and what could be perceived perceived as a more passive approach, to not meet an aggressive, violent group of people with a similar kind of aggression and violence, because we know who is most protected when they assert kinds of violence, because we have evidence to see that. When that white boy, that white teenager ran in that Black Lives Matter rally and shot people up, just because he felt unsafe after he drove there out miles away to go and target that group of people. He was protected and then heralded as, the best thing since sliced bread. Same thing with that white man who choked that man out on that New York City subway, was also heralded as the best thing since sliced bread. And it's because they are protected in a way that a lot of people who were saying, like, you have a platform, but we're talking about Black women, we're talking about Black folks, queer folks, Black and brown folks, people who are being swept off the street as we speak, disappeared. So it's like, there has to be a pragmatic approach, and we have to be, I think there's a wide range of identifying that we. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't do the things. I'm just saying that I don't know who this we is.
Right, right. So I think that it's incumbent on people who are not Black to take the reins in it, because we've exhausted the talking points. We've exhausted the
I was
action.
waiting for it.
It is the action is on the quote unquote allies. Like that is the point that we are in this conversation and in this country. There is really not much more that Black and brown and marginalized communities can do or say. It is incumbent on the people who are in our faces saying, we see you, we hear you. And to Marquise's earlier point, I'd like to note that at the time of this recording, the Charlie Kirk's assassin, the identity has not been released, right? We read an earlier report that it was an older man, an older white man, and now we're seeing retractions of that. And I think that will also determine and influence the response of the people. If they find a random person of color that goes to the college to pin it on, then we're going to see something. But I do wonder, in theory, right, that if this is, because this took place in Utah on a college campus, if this is someone who leans towards the right, who voted for Donald Trump, and who is a white person, what then will the response be? What then will the conversation be with the National Guard in these Democratic cities and the armed forces in these Democratic cities? Will they be in Utah? What even does the conversation, I know we all kind of agreed that the conversation on gun reform will not change. This will not move the needle, but I'm curious to see what conversations it might foster. Depending, go ahead, Chris, because here's what I'll say, and then I'll toss to you, Christina. I think that it really does depend on the identity and the optics and the nuances of who the assailant is. And like I said, I think that it's incumbent on white people to do something, to actually do something. Go ahead, Christina.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. That I was going to say the same thing, that we at this point don't know who it is. But if that person comes out to be their own, they're going to first try to find any little thing to try to align them with any type of leftist, the way that they did with the shooter who just did the school one, right?
The Trump guy.
Well, but they were like, she's a trans woman.
We don't, it hasn't really been, we don't know if that person was trans.
I'm talking about the person who quote unquote shot Trump.
But
well, that came and went.
Yeah. I'm talking about,
because he was a Trump supporter.
We don't even know their name.
Go ahead, Christina. I'm sorry.
That there's already been, but that's to my point. There's already been these mass shootings where they can't just, maybe like over a decade ago, it was just like this extremist incel person who was like upset, right? And like they were in their own corner. But a lot of incel extremist people have now just been adopted by the right, to where when we're seeing these mass shootings, it's coming from them, and they want so badly to try to pin it on some type of, this is the left, this is the liberal. I mean, Elon Musk just tweeted that, something about like the left is the party of murder, something like that, right? They're going to try to find a way to pin whomever this person is, if they are conservative on the right, to try to line them towards the left or liberal by any means necessary. And that is going to have, I think the people are so indoctrinated that is going to work somewhat. But in response to that, I think highlighting that they're cracking is going to be what's important, because you can already see little moments of implosion. The way that, like, he's talked about Medicaid and Medicare cuts happening, and his base being like, well, what the that got to do with us? You gonna take my food stamps, my Medicaid? The way that there's already signs of like an implosion, I don't think that toppling bringing down this like fascist regime is going to fully happen without bits of implosion inside the right, because they have so much money, they have so much power, they have so much control, they have so many guns. The implosion needs to happen. And that is where I would be like, the white leftists, the white liberals, I was literally just talking about this on live before this, is that the people love to look at France as like, why can't we do what France does? Well, the thing is, as someone who's lived there 3 times, the relationship France has with revolting, got my master's there in case you forgot, that the way that France has a relationship to revolting revolution is not separate from whiteness, because white French people do it. It's embedded in white Frenchness. Revolting and revolution is not embedded in white Americanness. So the French government sees that white people, the working white class, will revolt and put shit on fire and take a break from work at a drop of a hat, because that's in white French culture. The white leftists, the white liberals need to start embedding that into white American culture. So, and that is an important context. And I think that will shift things a bit, to your point that white folks really need to start getting up and going out, because Black and brown people, the way that America looks at revolting and violence is that's the Black and brown gangsters who are violent and they're heathens and they're animals. It's not related to whiteness.
I'll say,
and
this.
that's I think that's I feel like that is why I'm worried about when people say like white people, it's the white ally. Whose microphone is dipping and doing like that? It's twerking a little bit. Sorry, that is yours. Why. Like it's not. It's steadfast. This is a strong arm, buddy. Okay. Wait, hold on. Let me check.
No, it was me. My bad.
Okay. I'm like, before I go on record saying it's so strong and it start wobbling again. No, but this is why I get very apprehensive about people saying that white people or our white allies need to go out and be at the forefront of the movement or need to go out. It's their time to put their bodies in the front lines. Not because I don't think that it makes sense surface level, but it's like, show me a time in American history when white people in mass number have worked for the minority, have had an objective that benefits overwhelmingly the minority. I cannot think of white people in mass.
White people had a huge contribution to the freedom rides and to ensure that folks down south could read and write to help them vote. Yes.
I ain't gonna lie.
I'm not trying to give them any bail, because they need to step up again.
Herbie's meaning is like, I think what you're saying, Antoinette, is yes, of course there were white people present, like who our white allies are there. But I think Herbie's trying to say I think Herbie's speaking to like white America, like the mass of white America, not of white people that like are on our side or politically situated. I think that like no, we're not going to get a mass of white America doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even when we're talking about the freedom ride, like that's a minority of white people, right? A minority of the white population. I think when we're talking about that, when we say it's incumbent upon white allies to fight against largely white supremacists or white supremacist imperialists, I'm not certain that what they're going to do is going to disproportionately benefit Black people. And when we see that ICE is raiding immigrants, but not white immigrants, Latino, Black and brown immigrants, when we see whatever, I don't know who's going to be the perpetrator of this crime, but even outside of that, when we're looking in DC, we're seeing that Black neighborhoods are disproportionately being targeted. I'm just not certain that when white people get to rioting in the streets, that they're going to be rioting for Black hoods, that they're going to be rioting for or on behalf of, and even if they are, how does that trickle to those communities? Because how do they even know the objectives? How are they specific enough to know what these people need?
How can Black people move in today's day and age? Like I was listening to you all earlier, and the dramatic shift is that civility is out the window. So much of this stuff used to exist on 4chan and on the dark web, and now it's in our faces. Now the Department of Homeland Security can tweet out your first and last name. It's not this undercover tapping your phone type thing. And so it's like, how much more Black blood needs to be shed? How much more Black labor needs to be platformed in a way in which we're exhausting one another or we're exhausting ourselves to see something? When we look at the history, to your point, Herbie, of how white people have not done things in mass to benefit marginalized communities, we could also flip that and look at the strides that our ancestors made, but also in historical context, for every 2 steps we make, we get knocked back 3. At least it seems. I mean, look at where we are today. Look at the conversation we're having today in 2025. You couldn't have told me 10 years ago in 2015 that it would be this bad as it is today. And we're only 8 months into an alleged 4-year term of this monster in the White House. Go ahead.
Come on,
I feel like
alleged.
a couple of
I
things.
mean,
I actually wrote notes because I was trying not to interrupt. There's so many things. I feel like with white folks, we're not going to get a majority because the majority doesn't agree with what the hell we're talking about, y'all. Like what? Like how are we going to get a majority? The majority is listening and mourning Charlie Kirk in many ways. Now I don't know where everybody's situated. I'm in New York, right? I know that this is a political kind of bubble. White folks are in the streets. And I very much remember during 2020 when white folks very strategically said, all Black folks that are out here marching, get in the center. We get on the outside to ensure that there's no police violence against you. And I remember being like, oh shit, they get it. Right now, New York is a very specific place. I completely understand that. With that said, I do think that we have to, I do agree with Shar that the white people that are willing, that do have their shit together, whether their shit together, meaning they are critical thinkers and have some clairvoyance, they do need to step up and be willing to risk something for what they believe in. And I don't think that we should get our hopes up and think that they're going to be a majority in a lot of these other places around the country. It's just not going to be the case, right? What I do think, though, that is very important is that Black and brown folks within their own communities, within our communities, need to reclaim our narratives, because it is not like our community. We're all on the same page with this. Right. Okay. There's a lot of folks that are also being indoctrinated into all kinds of things, not just the Charlie Kirk ways of the world, but the Andrew Tate ways of the world, but to the Black capitalist ways of the world. And so we need, and there is a blueprint set out, because I've studied the Panthers. There's a blueprint there for how we can take back our narratives within our own community. How, if you don't teach me at school, if you ban that book, I still know how we can help folks understand how to critically think when they're in these positions, to understand, hold up, that's not my narrative. Hold up, these are my rights, and equip and arm our community with the love and the respect that they deserve. And that has to be super intentional right now. So I think that's where we get activated and where we get really intentional. And it might not look like, it doesn't matter if you have 10,000 followers or 100,000 followers. You have the capability to touch somebody and to ensure that they understand what the hell is going on. And I know for me, and I only speak for myself, a lot of this political speak, a lot of people don't understand. So I vow to break it down in ways that I feel like it's digestible, so that people can follow and so that people can critically think about it as best as I can, because I'm not the best critical thinker. But I think that is super important. And I think that we need to go back to that blueprint. I also think that something that is exhausting, and it might not be, I don't know that it's our work, but I think that it does help equip us with certain tools, is to understand why the Charlie Kirks, the Ben Shapiros, the Megyn Kellys are so appealing to folks, and to go further than just racism, right? To understand, try to understand, and I'm not saying give bail, but to understand so that we know how to combat it with actual information if it's possible. Some people are too far gone. But as somebody who I always bring this up, has a white side of my family who I'm trying to get through to, I can see the disconnect. I see like, oh, you actually aren't given this information. That doesn't excuse you of your ignorance, but it at least arms me with how I need to deal with you and what the is like, because otherwise I'm not sure if we're equipping ourselves. It's like, if we don't fully understand the problem and the psyche of your quote unquote enemy, then how do you actually combat it? Like, if I don't know your strengths and your weaknesses, I'm not sure that I know how to maneuver with you.
I think
but
that
that's a lot of
they lie
really,
effectively. They
think,
lie effectively. I feel like that's the biggest issue.
That's all they do.
It's appealing. It's appealing to populism, right? Like I'm sure, I don't know if everybody knows about this, but like it's a growing ideological movement of like the elite are against us. So anybody operating in an elitist position, whether that's politics, whether that's the billionaires, they can lie in a way that is nonsensical, that is not streamlined, that's not in a straight line, but it feels like it's an emotional argument. It's an appeal to what it is that you're going through. You have a lack of resources. You have a lack of
the elite is their friends.
But that's why I said it's the
intellectual
it's appealing
elite.
to these idea. Correct. It's anybody in a position of some sort of hierarchy where you feel like this person is talking down on me, or their policies are not benefiting me, or they're talking in a way where it's, even if their policies are actually benefiting you, the way that they're disseminating information, which is a critique I've had of the Democrats for quite some time, they're disseminating information in such a way where people feel like there's a distance. You're not understanding what I'm going through because you're pro the system as it functions. And what it seems like Republicans are willing to do is tear this motherfucker down. And that's because they are. But they're willing to tear it down to rebuild the more perfect idea of this fascist state. That said, when we're talking about like this idea of like us galvanizing and like pulling from the ideas of the freedom of like, well, the Freedom Riders and the Black Panthers, Jill Scott Heron said, the revolution will not be televised. I would add that it is being surveilled in a way that it has never been surveilled before. All of our ideas exist publicly. Right now, we're having a very political conversation about how we can radicalize and how we can organize and galvanize in a very public forum where anybody who has access to YouTube can watch this video. And there's no such thing as a Black space unless it's in person, and it's very difficult to get people to come out in person because I think a lot of these movements were centered around the church, and we see a mass exodus of Black people from the church, and like all these different institutions that used to galvanize people in a specific way are no longer around in the ways that they were at the time. Also, I want to say about the Freedom Riders, that was still just
surveilled folks were, but keep going.
Well, I don't. It's not to negate that people were very surveilled. I just brought up Aretha Franklin, who was tracked by the FBI,
folks.
and regular folks as well.
Even
The Black Panther movement was infiltrated by the FBI. So it's not that regular folks were not surveilled. It's just that their ideas didn't leave their mind, come onto a computer, and upload for the whole world to see. It's much easier to be surveilled in the digital era as opposed to when it was when we used to galvanize. The last point that I want to make is around the Freedom Riders and like how that was still a multiracial. Actually, I agree with all of what you said, Antoinette, and what you said, Shar. But I think it's the point that I was making, or the caution that I had, was not around white people putting their bodies on the front lines and using their social and physical capital to push ideas further than what they could be with Black bodies. It's that it has to be an integrated multiracial movement where Black people's ideas and our demands are at the center of that movement. And that means that Black people have to be a part of this in some way. And I'm not certain what that looks like.
No, because that kind of reminds me of LGBTQ plus rights, where once white gay men in particular got marriage equality, they kind of just ditched everybody else. But to Antoinette's earlier point about the politics of it all, I think that a lot of it boils down. I think that the Megyn Kellys and the Charlie Kirks are so appealing because, just to add on to what Herbie was saying, so many people are upset with their current life, right? Where they are in life. And instead of zooming out and looking at it as a systemic failure, they're looking for someone to blame. And that's where that emotional argument comes in, where it's like, it's not me as Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. Don't look at me as Jeff Bezos to blame. Look at your neighbor. It's the Black lady across the street who's driving a better car than you. She's the source of all of your problems. And then to loop it into Christina's point about France and the optics and how the white people react over there, we don't have class solidarity, because if we did, there would be a totally different conversation, because there are people, I can't remember whose quote it was. I want to say it was J. Edgar Hoover. That was like, if you can convince the lowest white man to think he's better than a Black man, then, we got him, or whatever. I'm loosely quoting that, that's something that is so deeply ingrained, where racism is at the root of everything in America and really globally, but that's driving so many people, that drives them to the polls. It drives their decisions. And for me, it boils down to, do you hate me more than you claim to love yourself? And for so many people, they hate marginalized people more than they claim to love themselves. Otherwise, to the point about those policies and the laws that were introduced designed to benefit everyone, they'd rather us not get a piece of the pie at all. They'd rather burn it all down than to see us benefit in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And we've seen that when we look at the exit poll numbers. We've seen that when white women have voted for Donald Trump every time he's run, there's been a higher percentage of white women, even with the pink pussy hats, even with the summer of racial reckoning, when everyone was in the streets, summer 2020, when it looked like kumbaya out there, everybody's taking tear gas and rubber bullets. And they still went to the polls in November and voted for that man overwhelmingly. Right. And so there is a deeper conversation that needs to happen. But I think at its core that the right is so good at tapping into that emotion where the left and some of the common sense laws or the common sense talking points that might be introduced they don't apply. They don't apply. And they have all that money. Look at how trans people were demonized. Less than 1% of the population. Mm-hmm. And they're running anti-trans ads on NFL Sunday, 6 times a quarter or whatever. I don't know sports. I'm just throwing out an analogy. But
I believe that statistic.
You're right.
It's so layered and it's really nasty work, as the people say. It's nasty work.
No, and I think so much of what y'all said, it's important to kind of contextualize too of as we are in this moment and as we're having a conversation around where does this all really stem from, it's also they can't keep up the lie anymore, right? It's hard to keep up that lie that you are better than somebody else. You're better than that Black person over there when you have so many of these things happening. I think it's also important to kind of note, are all of us living in major cities? Don't answer that question out loud. But nonetheless, I think it's also important to note, because when I talk to some of my folks that were down south, they are actively actually feeling the policies that Biden and past presidents were able to actually enact, right? And so I think it's also sometimes a privilege of being in the Northeast and being in larger cities that we naturally kind of move in a particular kind of way where we don't immediately feel the first effects of a lot of these things that are happening or some of the positives that are going on. But I actively remember talking to some of my family down south and friends down south who are like, nah, we live in rural, we're in smaller towns, we're in the countryside, we're down south. And so we were able to feel the effects, the positive effects of a Biden presidency when he was enacted, right? They felt the effects of when Trump was taking stuff away. People in rural America feel the effects when they revoked the Digital Equity Act, because now kids in middle America actually don't have access to equitable Wi-Fi, don't have access to this information, might not have access to this YouTube channel. Kids in schools don't have the access to even get out to the more information, right? And so those are things that we don't get because where I'm at, we got Comcast right down the street. They're going to give us that Wi-Fi, whether we want it to be true or not, okay? And
not
so,
Comcast.
Okay. But nonetheless, but I think it's important to kind of note sometimes the privilege of being within a larger city and in a space where we have a little bit more conveniences because it's easier for us to get to our neighbors. It's easier for us to get to a bodega. It's easier for us to get to and from school if we need to take public transportation, right? Now, well, Philly a little different right now, but nonetheless. But I think it's important to kind of note, I think it's important to kind of note as we talk around those political figures, the Megyn Kellys, this dude right now, why do I always forget his name? God rest. Kirk, thank you. Charlie Kirk. There we go. But it's important to kind of note of how this landscape, this commentary landscape has significantly shifted within the last 10 years too. So yeah, it may not feel normal, but this is actually the new norm in terms of how we are showing up in these spaces. And the reason that part of them are also appealing to so many people outside of just the emotional standpoint, it's also kind of thinking around yo, their life is fundamentally harder under Trump. Their life is fundamentally harder across the board, but also people want to feel like they are not bad people. So when the social contract evidently changed when Obama was here, and then we had to deal with the white lash of all of them being resentful of having somebody Black person in presidency for 8 years, they have actively been working on this way to get their lick back, right? Because that was somebody who felt polished enough that you really could not say too much about him. And so when you really think around like the political moment that happened in that moment, how we are here situated, not post, but a Trump presidency, Biden in between, and Trump again, all of these moments are like a social contract that we are witnessing a tension happen, because now people are like, America told me I could say whatever I want. I have my First Amendment right. I'm allowed to have my opinion. I'm allowed to do this thing. But now that these things are, you're watching the consequences, and maybe these are like the pitfalls of democracy and why an idealized version of democracy may not be a sustainable model all the time. And this is more theoretical, but when you think around what does democracy mean in the long run and how we engage in it, when we are still actively putting somebody like a Trump in presidency, when we're seeing this conservative movement begin to happen, I'm like, if y'all taking it back, you forget the inception of America was also the Pilgrims were trying to get their own way to practice their own religious freedom. But like, if
Not
we're
the
gonna,
Pilgrims.
got to take it back to the Mayflower. And so, no, but in reality, though, I think it is important to kind of like note of like how they kind of bastardize their own history, how they even see this, their own version of themselves and what America was really founded on. And even when they even talk around their First Amendment rights, y'all, that's so the government does not intervene in your stuff. A lot of this was protection, so the government does not do what they can do today. And so when we see these not small, but are like our civil rights and the ways in which that they are fighting, a lot of it is a misguided fight. And so how do we take somebody who, what the Republicans do well is speaking on that third grade reading level, is speaking on that fourth grade reading level, on that fifth grade reading level, because they can, because they are able to, but they know how to communicate that. And so even as people, even for all of us, we are practitioners of communication. So we need to know how to disseminate information. We contextualize things for people. We are able to kind of make things make sense or connect dots. And so even as Antoinette was really getting to, which I really appreciate, is like, how are we able to still take it from academia to the hood and making sure everybody in between knows exactly what this moment means? Because I talk to my block captain every day.
Not this moment. Us. What our history is, who we are, not this moment.
Right.
Every moment.
If I may quickly, because it does sometimes feel like the toothpaste is a bit out of the tube. And what I mean when I say that is everybody is like siloed off. There's so many people who get their news and their information in a vacuum, in a one-lane silo where it's literally just fishing for confirmation bias. So I don't know what democracy looks like moving forward. I don't know if media is being so changed in such drastic ways where we see like overt bias, where that man can say anything and you're threatened to be pulled off air. I don't know what that looks like moving forward. And that's also a very particularly scary piece of this conversation for me, because I don't know how we get, like I said, if civility has left out of the building, and it doesn't appear to be coming back anytime soon. But how do we get that messaging across and meet people where they're at if everybody can curate based on these things, can curate and put in a vacuum the news that they choose to believe and what they receive?
I feel like too, so sorry, who was talking? Sorry. I feel like too, like, when Marcus said a thing, and I know this wasn't like a general statement, but like when you're like, everybody wants to, or like a lot of people want, Marquise, I'm so sorry. You're literally saving my phone as Marcus.
Herbie insists on calling you Marcus. I tell him all the time, and it's hard. That's the name. And it's hard.
Olay, me and Herbie were together 2 days ago. He said Marcus. I said.
And you are Marcus then, and you're going to be Marcus now. No, Marquise, I take it all the way back. So what Marquise was just saying, and I know it wasn't a general statement, but like, I feel like when you were like, oh, people want to feel like they're a good person, I feel like people want to be terrible people under the guise of something that obscures their true intentions. So like they want goods. Correct. And so they want to be terrible people, but they just want to say, oh, this is my conservatism, right? Because like this, trying to make trans people out to be a villain, and this one's for the minorities, trying to make trans people out to be the villain when they are 4 times more likely to be the victims of a violent crime as cis people. There's no data. You actually can't even quantify, or I find it very difficult in my like passive and cursory research to trying to find the amount, or like try to find studies that quantify the amount of violent crimes that are committed by trans people, because one, they're just a small population and there's so few violent crimes that they actually commit. So this idea, it's like, what you really find out is like bigotry is nonsensical in nature. So trying to orient a message to people who are not all the way there, who the foundation of their ideology is something that is, it forgoes all logic. It's not real. They've made up an idea based on people they were told to hate, and they've committed to it.
Them.
The consequences are real, but it is still made up. And I'm going to tell you to your face, this is your imaginary premise thing, because it's not. Like, Black women are the most educated population demographic in this country. So all these ideas that you have, and we're talking about who Black people are and are not, it's not real. It's not rooted in fact. It's not rooted in data. I just did a video on Black conservatives and kind of like the agenda around that on my main channel, around like all these ideas that people have around Black people. And like, when we're talking about too, like, for instance, first of all, let me finish that thought. When we're talking about Black people, and somebody said earlier, and the people who are watching can rewind, somebody said earlier about how they want Black people to remain in this like 3/5 state in this country. And it's like, when it comes to economics in a capitalist structure, which is one of the most important things to consider in a capitalist structure, Black people are beneath 3/5 of everybody else in this country, right? White people own 85% of everything. And so when people have, and that is, money is power. Money is control. Money controls messaging. He who controls the media controls the mind, whatever, right? And so it's like, when we're trying to capitulate our messaging to appeal to people who have everything, white people have 84% of all of the country's wealth. Black people who have 3% of all of the country's wealth, right? And who have contributed over $42 trillion in 400 years of unpaid labor, slavery, all of the things. When we've contributed so much to this country and we get nothing back in return, and white people continue to benefit from that, I believe there's idea that is endemic in the structure of whiteness that doesn't allow them to hear. Because what we need to say is we need to radically change things such that things are equal. What they will always hear is we need to take things from you that you didn't earn, in order for us to create a system that is unfair to me. And it's like, no, that's just equity. That's just equality. That's just fairness. But you've never existed in a structure that is fair. And so this is why I always say I will never truly trust the politic, because the people who need the most help and the most security, the most fight right now, are minority groups. And I'm not saying I have the answer, but I would never put it in the hands of white people to fight for the needs of a minority group, when the way they are economically, socially, legally, and culturally structured is to fend for themselves, because everything is geared towards them, even if it's unconscious. So it's going to give the Freedom Riders movement, where on the first bus it was 7 Blacks and 6 whites. It's going to give overwhelmingly Black and brown, to my thought, and there are more white people. So from a quantity perspective, we can have excuse my French, a ton of white people come out and do their thing. But from an ideological perspective, what is the most salient? What is the most prominent? I need in the boardroom. And everybody, the people who are following instructions, I need white people.
White folks shouldn't be calling the shots for a movement that is going to benefit Black and brown folks. That I don't think. No, I don't think that's what anyone on this panel.
I definitely was not.
They should be using their bodies.
Okay.
They should be using their bodies.
You said it earlier, Herbie. Use your social, political capital for good.
And physical.
And your body.
And finance.
That's also capital.
Right. Like, use that to enhance this. And so the first thing you have to do is humble yourself so you can understand. And I think that's, like, I have a white mom right now who just got woke, and she wants to tell me what Black people need to do. And that's the conversations that I'm having, where I'm like, so you need to sit down. That's your problem.
Hold on now, mother.
Is that you come through hot and you haven't asked one question. And so I completely understand what you're talking about. What I need you to do is to listen, ask what you need, ask me what I need, and then go do it. Okay. And that is, I think, what I want to make that abundantly clear, because I don't know if I did, but that is what I think needs to happen. I think, and I do think it's vital, but I'll shut up. Go ahead.
No, you're good, because Christina, actually, my bad. Were you jumping in?
I'll jump in after you.
Okay. And I also want to kind of situate it from like a historical movement perspective as well. Like, for me, as I think around all of this stuff, kind of giving folks a little bit of a framework who are listening to this conversation. I think around like the 10-point plan program from the Black Panther Party as well. And those still, a lot of those 10 points that they were asking for and demanding were absolutely talking around the same things that we're asking for today. Equitable housing, equitable education, stop sending us out to the military. We don't have to participate in this kind of stuff, right? There are a lot of things that are absolutely part of that 10-point plan. And if we really know a lot of our history, one thing I think around is like the Black and Puerto Rican movements and how they were coming together, right? The Young Lords played a significant role in being able to take the ideology of the Black Panther Party and being able to figure out how do Puerto Ricans also play a role in this game too. So when you even think around how the Young Lords and the Rainbow Coalition actually began to come about with all of these different parties, we need to once again figure out, is it even possible in America now to articulate a class struggle and being able to across the board make common sense policy that is like, hey, actually your housing, the problem that all of our PICO bills are up in these cities right now are going to be a problem.
Have a blueprint. The poor
we have
the
blueprint has always existed, right? But it's a matter of, the question I always ask myself is like, can this Rainbow Coalition exist today with the racial stratifications that also exist in this space now too? And so I bring up the Young Lords and the Black Panther Party in this moment because I think those can be a little bit more accurate of starting points for our communities to really start thinking around. I know because of the connotation of the Black Panthers, it feels much more radical than it is just like, this is not that radical of things that we're actually asking for. And so how do we articulate that so we can start to change the culture so people can acknowledge that the problem exists and then want to motivate people to move that problem even further along? And so when we are coalition building, when we're trying to make sense of like, what are the needs of our communities now, who is willing to be in each of these different pockets and say, yes, we need fair housing for all, but creating that framework that then can be adjusted based on what my family needs in Charleston versus what I need in Philly are fundamentally two different things, but they are still achieving the same goal. And so we need to figure out, whoever leads that, wherever that goes, how do we communicate that so more people are like, oh, it's just like that? Everybody does a SWOT analysis at work. Y'all can't do a SWOT analysis in your community? And so I don't know. So I know it's not always that simple, but I do think it's a start of dream building and imagination and looking for a blueprint that already exists in order for us to get to the goals that we want. But I start in smaller communities of like, what is my immediate locus of control and who feels accountable to me? Because I can't hold other people accountable to join this movement. But if we actually have a starting point and a framework that is proof of concept, then we can start saying like, hey, it's done actually right now in Baltimore. Oh, investing in resources for your third spaces and after school programs and mentorship actually drove results that make the city fundamentally safer that we have not seen in years, because you can no longer argue the fact with the story they try to tell of Baltimore, right? So how do we continue to like build those pieces more and more? And so those of you who are engaging in the comments, those of you who are watching this at a later time in a live chat, you have to assess like your needs in that, where is your city or town or whatever your locus of control is, and how do you begin to build that framework so more people, so the culture will change, which then policy has no choice but to follow, and then folks have no choice, but they cannot ignore the inevitable truth because you made that white person's life easier, that Black person's life easier, that trans person's life easier, because you don't have to lead it with that necessarily. We can consider those intersections. But if you have that articulation foundation of like your basic life of respect and meeting those basic needs can be met across the board, I think it can garner success.
And you gotta move. You said everything out damn near. Great jumping off point, because it was. You did shit. Well, f me then. No, but
nah, you went.
My
based
drag.
off of what that's what I was gonna say when Shar was talking about echo chambers online. I think this all goes back. Oh yeah, what Shar, you were saying about echo chambers online. Herbie, you and I talking about being a creative online and it being like theoretical online and how that's shifting. And Marquise, you talking about knowing your neighbors, damn, basically, and like moving local. I think this is not a lot of people like fully delve into how like we're dealing with social revolution with social media, and we don't have a historical reference for that because we are living in it.
We're building. The furthest we go back is the Arab Spring.
You know what I'm saying? The motherfuckers back in the day, motherfuckers had to walk down the block to a printing press and print a pamphlet and then pass it out. We could pull this up and make a 30-second, 2-minute video and post it. And I think it's, as much as it's like we can get a lot of information that is necessary in real time, and that's beautiful, it also warps our reality. And I've been as someone who creates that content, I had to pull back and be able to divide what is the content that I'm putting on the larger, greater, general scale, and what am I doing locally, and how am I addressing things locally? What is my role locally, and how can I bring what I'm doing locally to what I'm doing online? Like, okay, if I'm based in New York and Zohran Mamdani is up for mayor, I'm going to be talking about New York. I'm going to be talking about New York, and because I'm here and I can actively be a part of that, organizing on the ground level, and the general population needs to know it. So let me amplify something I can literally get my hands on. And that doesn't mean that I don't care about other stuff. That just means I know what my role is now. And I think social media also brings this feeling that you have to be the expert and you have to have every single role, which goes into like what we're talking about today of feeling more pacifist versus revolutionary. All of those roles need to exist. If your role is to be the pacifist person and that's your calling, do that. And the person who's calling, who has the nervous system, who has the energy, the resources to be a little more rowdy, let them do them, because you're all moving, or should be moving, to the same goal. So that's also part of the coalition building. Like, what are you bringing to the table? What can you handle? What's your capacity? What are your resources? I'm going to do me, you do you. And then we're going to be building this coalition and building this community locally together, and not be like, your way don't make sense, my way don't make sense. No, I don't want to do your way, but you do your way well. So let me do my way well. And then we find ourselves in the same room any ways. And that is what I feel like really needs to be emphasized, because it's like these echo chambers can get scary and be really dysregulating, and you're not grounded in your not present, but your immediate surroundings and reality. And people can talk about what video they see online or the theories they see online, but when you have, like Marquise, you're saying, the concrete, okay, well, the opposite of that got you food. The opposite of that got that person housing. You see how this tangible example or this tangible reality that you're experiencing goes against what you saw in this YouTube video? That is going to be that is the start to breaking people's mold and deconstructing what is their real life lived experiences versus what they're puppeteering.
I think
which is crazy because it goes back to Obamacare versus Affordable Care Act all over again.
Yes, that's a good example.
I think that's a really great point. I also think when it comes to organizing, right? You said something about a goal, and it has to be a shared goal. And I think when you're organizing, it's really important that the people that you're organizing with, not that it's an echo chamber, but that everyone is on the same accord. Because what we're seeing right now is that we want so much democracy. I won't say we. The Democratic Party wants so much democracy, right? That there's all this infighting in the party, and you don't have a shared goal and a shared vision, which is why you can't galvanize a thing. And so when we're doing that for ourselves, I'm kind of like, well, you can't be you if I'm organizing with you, your goal can't be to be a billionaire. You can't be a black capitalist. That can't be your goal. That can't be your vision of freedom, because we're not on the same page. And I think so often we all have good hearts, good minds, good intentions, and we get in a room and then we look up and we don't ask each other, wait, what is your version of freedom? That ain't mine. Wait a minute. And then we start to have all kinds of infighting and issues there. So it's tricky. I think we always need to be aware. I'm so with you, Christina, of what's going on, because especially, I won't say where you live, but I think you said it already. You and I in New York, it's tricky. Like, we're in a bubble. Mamdani is leading in the polls. I don't know where else he would do that, right? It's like fantasy land over here at times. But in the same respect, like, we have to be aware of what's going on with the farmers in Utah. Because though on a federal level, national level, that's going to impact the messaging there. That's going to impact how we are actually considering these conversations and considering what kind of collaborations we need to have when it comes to interstate kind of stuff. Because unfortunately, we are the United States, which is a failing.
Not unfortunately.
Well, it is a failing experiment.
States' rights.
So, I'll just say that, like, I don't know how many people that I have these conversations with where we have a shared vision. Black capitalism has fucked us up so much.
I feel like it should be easier. It should be easier to have it should be. A lot of things should be easier, right? Like a lot of things should be easier. Actually, I'd never like to should all over someone else's ideas. But it could be easier. I forget who it was that in the key of Kamala, we all have so much more in common than it separates us.
I cannot.
And so with that being said, I just feel like, I forget what study I read. It is in my video about Black conservatives on main channel. You should check it out. Thank you. It was a good video.
I watched it.
Thank you. Thank you. Triple thank you. But I forget where I found this information, but it's somewhere around 63% of all employees are unable to cover a $500 emergency expense. So even though I said white people have so much wealth, and they do, disproportionate, it's almost predatory, almost violent. We need to really interrogate that. People are not getting their needs met and really don't have capital. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck. So when this brings me back to the part of the conversation where we were talking about class consciousness. It's like, yeah, we have the blueprints and perhaps the capital, the social infrastructure to develop a class conscious movement. But it's like, if everybody could understand that the core of what it is that you're debating, the core of what it is that keeps these bigoted structures in place is a deep-rooted selfish desire to not just be rich, but to be richer and to subjugate everybody underneath you. It's an exploitative context. Then we would be able to develop a class conscious movement where perhaps we could have, white people come up to it, you come in the boardroom so we could discuss this together. Because it's like everybody is, and this is so far away from the topic, but everybody is suffering under the same capitalist system. So ideally, it would make a lot of sense if we could create some sort of coalition amongst everybody who broke, because most people are broke. Most people are
I don't think it's far away. I think you're touching on exactly why a Charlie Kirk is appealing, because people don't get this right here.
Yeah.
Wow. And if it also helps for some feedback. Okay.
Oh,
crap. I'm going to leave it with a tip. Okay.
You thought you out.
I'm going to leave it with a tip, Olay.
I was like, they got it today. That sounds like a show.
Yes. If anything, can I quick add for the people? If there is some homework that you quickly want to do, look up the condition making framework, because the Cinefin framework will actually kind of help you identify like clear or simple potential solutions, complicated, and they kind of break it into 5 different things and how to do condition making, but it allows you to assess a situation and actually start finding different ways to implement that within your communities. So if that does help folks who are there, there's an actual framework that you can go by.
If you say one more thing and say something breaks into 5 parts, you automatically need your ass beat.
I'm so sorry. It's 5 different. Shut up. Anyways, get me out of here, asshole.
Stop what you're doing and listen up. You just watched a video on one of my channels, but the Illuminati verse is huge, and I want to tell you what everything is and how to find it. The Illuminati verse has 6 channels. On the YouTube homepage of any one of those channels, every single channel in the Illuminati verse is featured at the bottom of the page, so you can always easily find them. Okay? Remember I said that. Don't say I ain't tell you how to find it. Subscribe to my main channel, Illuminati, to find my Illuminati productions, which are my long-form video essays and also all of my backlog of content. Subscribe to my second love child, Illuminati Pop, for my weekly video essays analyzing my favorite TV and movie shows and characters. Illuminati Pop also has its own Patreon where you get all of those videos uncensored. Subscribe to my channel, Olay and Friends, for my podcast, Olay and Friends. New episodes of Olay and Friends come out every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to Olay and Chill for new episodes of my podcast, Olay and Chill, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And also, So both Olay and Friends and Olay and Chill are both available on streaming platforms like Spotify. Subscribe to Illuminati Bites if you want my takes, but you don't have an hour to spend. Subscribe to Illuminati Politics for my political analysis and my State of the Union type addresses on my show O Squared. And last but not least, subscribe to my Substack Illuminati for my written work.